I'm loving the pop off.
What's good? Welcome back to the Pop Off Podcast, a talk show about the 2024 NBA Draft. The first round just wrapped up, and it was not a top-heavy draft or one that had a lot of motion, really at all. You know, we've had Wemby last year, Paolo the year before that, Zion in years past, Cade Cunningham, Anthony Edwards, really big, bright personalities at the top of these drafts. So this draft has been kind of overlooked, I think, for the most part. There's always going to be conversation about the draft just because it's new, it's exciting, it's young players coming into one of the more dramatic leagues in the world, right? So I just wanted to look at this and I wanted to give some positives and some negatives from the draft. I want to start with the negatives, though, because the first two picks in this draft are two Frenchmen, Zaccharie Risacher going to the Atlanta Hawks at number 1 overall, and Alexandre Sarr going to the Washington Wizards. Both of these franchises are impoverished. I can't tolerate either of them. I'm sick of watching them on League Pass. I try to avoid them for the most part just because there's no excitement to them whatsoever. I don't like either of the rebrands. I don't like the uniforms. I don't like the courts. There really isn't anything about either of these franchises that excites me. And these first two picks, I'm kind of glad it turned out this way because the other guys that I like in this class a lot, and there are quite a few of them, I'm glad they didn't end up in these two locations. I don't think that either of these players are going to work out as even all-stars. And that's what you're looking at number 1 and number 2 in the draft. Think LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley. I mean, there's a number of guys. John Morant, these recent number 1 and number 2 overall picks, Paolo Banchero, they at least evolve into a borderline all-star. I don't think either of these guys have that as their ceilings in the NBA. I don't like their work ethics. I don't like the way that they've approached the draft specifically. Sarr didn't even work out for the Atlanta Hawks, and Risacher has been avoiding people in workouts, according to Buzelis, who ended up with the Chicago Bulls. We'll get to him in a little bit. But I just don't believe in either of these two guys, and especially after where they ended up at. So, I mean, I don't know, man. Like, I don't want to, hate on 18 and 19-year-old kids by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's just much more likely that because of the cultures and environments that they're ending up in, it's not going to be the best possible result for either them or the programs that they're landing in. So let's go to a positive, and let's start with the Rockets and the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs got my favorite player in the class, and that's Stephon Castle. I love this guy. I think that we talked about it with Masterson on the Wemby special pod. I think he's a special talent offensively and defensively. He's a guy who is coming from an environment at UConn, a winner, a competitive motherfucker that just wants to get after it on both ends. These are my favorite kind of players. And then Reed Sheppard is a guy who can shoot the lights out. And he's joining a Rockets team that, had a pretty good second half of the season last year, especially after Şengün got hurt. We saw them kind of go to a small ball lineup with Amen Thompson at the power forward, even sometimes playing center for them, a guy who got drafted last year as a point guard / shooting guard / small forward hybrid, and they put him in the small ball center role. And he showcased just how explosive of an athlete he can be, what kind of playmaker he can be. And then you have Jalen Green, who ever since becoming a baby daddy with Drea Michelle, he lit it up. Like, he was showing us why he was the number 2 overall pick behind Cade Cunningham. Or did he go number 3? I can't remember if him or Mobley went 2 or 3. Nevertheless, I like what the Rockets are doing here. And now they're getting a Reed Sheppard who is just, we don't know if he's going to be Steph Curry or Seth Curry or Peyton Pritchard. He's not going to be Steph, right? But he has the same measurables as Steph, which I think is fascinating because this whole draft process, we've been talking about how small he is. And he's, 6'2 and a half, 6'2 and 3/4, somewhere in that range. And then I think he's a little bit better defensively than people give him credit for. He's definitely not Pritchard on that end, even though Pritchard, I think, actually had some pretty timely stops in the finals. People overlook that fact just because he's a small white guy from Oregon. But I think that he's just such a great shooter that you can't pass on him here if you're Houston. It doesn't matter if you have Fred VanVleet. It doesn't matter if you have Jalen Green, Whitmore, Tari Eason, whoever it might be. They're going to find a way to get him minutes. And Udoka, I think, will get the most out of him. I don't know anything about the number 6 overall pick. His name is Tidani Salan. This is a guy that through the draft process, I prepare for it about 2 weeks out. I start watching tape, highlights, full games if I can on YouTube. This is just something I missed. And he's ending up in Charlotte. Charlotte has been such an up and down franchise for me. I loved the Brandon Miller and Mark Williams picks over the last couple of years. I think they're both really exciting prospects, both like two guys that you can build around, two pillars of a franchise. LaMelo is always up in the air. We don't know if he's going to play 20 games in a season or 30, but hopefully he can get to a 70 to 82 game season because I think he is a special talent, but we know he's getting paid like one, but we just got to see it on the court. Going back on the negatives, the ESPN broadcast, man, what are we doing? Jared McCain ends up in Philadelphia at the number 16 pick, a guy that I love, a Dookie, a great shooter, a competitor. And when he gets drafted, instead of cutting to highlights, what do they do instead? They flex the fact that he has 2.8 million followers on TikTok, and then they show his dances for 30 seconds. There's two broadcasts that are available on draft night. They do this for the NFL and they do this for the NBA. There's one on ABC and there's one on ESPN. The ABC one is supposed to be the emotional one, the one for the casual fan that just wants to watch young men realize their dreams. And that's beautiful. I'm glad that that's an offering. But the ESPN one is supposed to be sports focused, data driven, highlights. Talk to me about the player and the fit. The names Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey maybe came up once during this conversation about Jared McCain. And then during the interview, they're asking him about what's it like to have your dreams realized. That's important. But I want to know what Jared McCain thinks of. Isn't it going to be fun playing with Embiid and getting the most open looks in your entire life because the defense is going to be so concentrated on him and Maxey? Like, what's it going to be like to get wide open looks? Talk to me about that. Talk to me about what you think it's going to be like to play for Nick Nurse. Same thing applies to Dalton Knecht. This kid is a 23-year-old kid, goes from JUCO to Tennessee. I think he was at somewhere in Colorado before that, or maybe it was South Dakota. I can't recall, but he's going to be able to play with LeBron James and Anthony Davis and Austin Reeves. And his new coach is going to be JJ Redick, a guy who's going to have played in a similar role to what Knecht is going to play in for the Lakers and his future career as an NBA player. He's a shooter. This guy strokes it. Can we ask him about that rather than, it's pretty cool that you got drafted, huh? Like, we've heard that so many fucking times. I know that it's cool that they got drafted. Ask them that question first, and then let's move into the actual basketball after that. That's all I ask. Positive note on the broadcast, Malika Andrews is the one. I mean, she might be the messiah for these. I could watch her talk about anything, and I have watched her talk about everything. But when she talks about basketball, that's just where I'm at my happiest. Another pick that I absolutely adored, Rob Dillingham, goes number 8 overall to the Spurs, which they then trade to the Minnesota Timberwolves. You think back to the conference finals between the Timberwolves and the Mavericks. What did the Timberwolves lack? It wasn't defense. I mean, they had a hard time stopping Luka, but everybody's going to have a hard time stopping Luka and Kyrie when they're on. But they didn't have some guy to come off the bench to really get buckets. They were relying on Monte Morris to do that. Naz Reid is a big, and he can play as a starting power forward, but he's not Dillingham. Dillingham is a different level of explosion that I think is so fun for this team. Doesn't lack any confidence, and I can't imagine how confident he's going to be when he has Anthony Edwards in his ear, just telling him, shoot it every time you get it. It'll be fascinating to see how those two blend because they're two guys that just wake up out of bed and look for the nearest rim so they can put up shots at it. I'm really excited about this. I think it's a great pick, a great trade. Interesting from San Antonio to make this trade. I believe they receive Minnesota's 2030 and 2031 picks. So now that means Minnesota's first round picks are pretty much all out the window because most of them belong to Utah in the Gobert trade. And other 30 and 31 picks will belong to the San Antonio Spurs. I would have liked to see the Spurs get a player like Dillingham at this pick, but, they must be happy with Castle. They must think that's enough. They don't want to bring any other young guys into the roster yet. Probably go after some veterans and free agency. But I love the Dillingham move for the Timberwolves because I just can't stand watching Jordan McLaughlin play basketball. He was my least favorite player in the NBA this year. He does nothing. He's so boring. I don't know what he brings to the table. And I at least know with Dillingham that he's going to be a Lou Williams style player, a Bones Highland style of player that just makes basketball exciting for them. And as if they weren't exciting enough already. And the other thing with him is that defensively, that's where he's at his weakest. Well, you can trot out a lineup with him, Ant, Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid, or Cat, and he's going to have a backline of defense to support him. And offensively, play 18 minutes a game. Go get his 14 points. That's all they need from him. So I love that. Donovan Clingan goes to the Portland Trailblazers. This is fascinating to me because this is a team that just traded for DeAndre Ayton last summer. I'm not sure if they're going to play those two together or what the plan is here. Maybe they have some line of succession for Ayton. Maybe they have a trade lined up. But at the very least, it could be interesting. Ayton is a guy who hasn't realized his full potential yet in a system without Chris Paul at the helm. I could see it working. Masterson and I also talked about Wembanyama and Clingan alongside one another. The NBA is drifting into this idea that you can play two bigs again at the same time. The Timberwolves just did it with Cat and Gobert, and I think that the Trailblazers could accomplish this. Not that either of them are going to be as good as either of those players, but I really do believe in Clingan. I think he's a competitive motherfucker, and I'm wearing my Bill Walton shirt right now. He's a guy who kind of reminds me of that. A shot blocker on defense, a competitive dude, a winner coming from a winning college program like Walton did at UCLA. Clingan won 2 national titles at UConn. A gifted passer in the short roll. I think he has a lot more offensively than people think of him as just like, can he be Derek Lively? I think he can. Now, I think he also raises the ceiling of your young players like Shaedon Sharpe, Scoot Henderson. He makes their life easier as ball handlers as a really good screener. That's a big body coming out and setting screens 24 feet away from the basket and then rolling. And people are saying he might be a little bit of a shooter as well. So that'll be fun to see for him. Shocking pick. I'm not sure if this is a positive or a negative. I think it's good for college basketball, though. Don't know how it translates to the NBA. Zach Edey goes number 9 overall to the Memphis Grizzlies. Is he going to start for this team? Jaren Jackson, Desmond Bane, John Morant, Zaire Williams, Jake LaRavia, Santi Aldama, Vince Williams Jr., Gigi Jackson, and now Zach Edey in that mix. This is a fast team for the most part. They like to run in transition, and they struggle a little bit in half court. I think he brings some viability to their half court offense specifically because he is a talented post player. I mean, he won 2 back-to-back National Players of the Year, the Naismith Award. He's shown that he can get buckets. But are there teams that you just can't play him against? Like, let's say they run into the Rockets, and the Rockets decide, Şengün isn't the best path for them, and they decide to play Jabari Smith at the 5, Thompson at the 4, Eason, Green, and Shepard. Is that a game where it's like Edey can post up Jabari here and make life uncomfortable for him, or is Jabari just going to be able to rim run way too fast for Edey to keep up with, and he's going to get played off the floor? So that's an interesting kind of yin and yang for NBA teams to manage. But I think it's fun. I think it's exciting. I'm happy for him to be a top 10 pick. I did not see that coming 2 months ago, or even 5 or 6 months ago at that even. But I'm happy for him at the very least. We talked about Knecht. We talked about McCain. Nikola Topic. The Thunder are always a fascinating team to keep your eye on in these drafts because if you look at their success, specifically in the late lottery over the last few years, they get Cason Wallace last year. I think he was the 12th overall pick. Just significantly outperformed the number 2 overall pick, Scoot Henderson. And then they get Dort kind of in this range as well. Jalen Williams fell to this range. So there's just like a credibility that they've established as an organization that anytime they take somebody in the 10 to 17 to 18 range, you're like, oh shit, everybody else ahead of them fucked up because this guy's going to be a hooper. And when they're showing Topic and they're talking about him, they addressed him as the best passer in this class. What did the Thunder just lose? Josh Giddey. What is his best attribute? Passing. Sam Presti is a guy who does not like to lose passing. If you think about all the players that he has predicated over his time as the GM of the Thunder, it's James Harden, tremendously gifted passer. Russell Westbrook, maybe not the most gifted passer, but he at least padded the stats to get the assists up. Chris Paul, for his 1-year stint in Oklahoma City, one of the best passers of all time. Even Dennis Schroeder, Shea to a certain degree, Giddey. And now he's going out and he's getting Topic, who I think is their backup point guard. If they don't think of Cason as a point guard, they think of him more as a 2. They don't think Isaiah Joe is that, obviously. He's a 3-and-D guy. So I think this is fascinating just because he knows how to play basketball, knows how to move the rock, and he's going to have a very easy life in Oklahoma City when he's running a fast break with SGA, Jalen, even Caruso, Dort, and Chet. So I'm happy for him. He also has the deepest voice in the NBA already. He sounds like those old interviews where they would black the face out. Like I remember, I think it was the 60 Minutes with Michael Vick. They had like some dog fighters anonymously interviewed, and they would black their face out and they'd drop their voice all the way down like 14 octaves. That's what Topic sounds like. We posted a reel of him on the Instagram the other day, and I was shocked. I was shell shocked when I heard his voice for the first time. A couple other guys that I am really excited about. Deron Holmes going to Denver. He was the number 22 overall pick. The Nuggets traded with the Suns to go get him. He's a center from Dayton that I'm not sure what his comp is. He's kind of like skinnier Montrezl Harrell in a way. Like he plays both ends really well. He's athletic. He's agile. He was really good in the tournament against Arizona, from what I remember. And finally, the Nuggets just go get some sort of relief at center for Jokic. I mean, they were turning into DeAndre Jordan, and they just couldn't do it. Like that Minnesota series, Jokic was just getting worn out. He cannot consistently be playing 44 to 45 minutes per night with only 3 to 4 minutes of DeAndre. Because even those 3 to 4 minutes when DeAndre is on the floor is just such a net negative for the Nuggets that they had to make a move here. And I thought this was one of the better moves of the night. Because the thing about the draft is people are usually really locked in to the top 10 picks because it's like, oh, that guy's a top 10 pick in the NBA draft. He must have been awesome overseas in college, must have been a really high recruit in high school, whatever it is. But I think the biggest difference in the draft is usually 20 to 30, right? Or even 17 to 30. You think about a guy like Jaime Jaquez, who made an immediate impact for the Miami Heat last year. You think about those guys like the Christian Browns of the world that can come in their rookie year and be on competing teams, contending teams right away. That's what's exciting to me. I think that's really fucking fun. Even like McCain going to the Sixers at 16. Like that's when the draft starts, when competitive, contending teams are going to get guys to fill out their roster. Other than that, man, I don't really have a whole lot else. Ron Holland is a fun pick for the Pistons, I suppose. Kind of redundant with Asar Thompson. They have similar skill sets. Not the best shooters in the world, but really competitive, freaky athletes, all about that defense. AJ Johnson was a guy that I watched at the Combine that he thinks life's a little bit much about him. He's a little bit self-centered, but he's going to Milwaukee. Not sure he's going to see the floor a lot behind Damian Lillard. Jacoby Walter goes to the Raptors. They add some length. I really like the Tristan da Silva pick for the Magic. They just love German dudes. They got him, Franz, and Mo Wagner all on that team now, so that's fun. A couple of dudes I didn't even know, Bub Carrington and Khalil Ware, go 14 to 15 to the Wizards and the Heat. But overall, man, this is just a fun draft. I think that it's been overlooked because of its lack of top-heavy talent, but I think there are plenty of role players in this draft that are going to be in the league for a long time and make significant impacts on winning franchises for a while. I look at Castle. I look at Klingon. I look at Dillingham. He's going to be a guy that makes an impact almost immediately. Even Cody Williams for the Jazz. Jalen Williams, the younger brother. That's a team that's on the up and coming. Reed Shepard, like we talked about. I think this is a really fun draft, and I'm excited to see how these guys turn out, right? Because we can do all the projecting in the world that we want before the draft, but we don't know what's actually going to happen until we flick on League Pass and we see, holy shit, Keontae George is just a better basketball player than Scoot Henderson, and we didn't realize it until November of 2023, when in June it seemed like everything was, beautiful for Scoot. Turns out the league's a little bit tougher, and he just wasn't ready for it. So that's all I got. Thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it as always. I've got my Bill Walton shirt on tonight. RIP to the God. And yeah, let's have a fun second round of the NBA draft. We'll see if Bronny ends up getting selected. I have wagers on him going between 41 and 45 and 46 and 50. See if a team takes a risk on going and snagging him. See where Jamal Shed ends up. Guys of that ilk. Cal Filipowski's still on the board. I'm recording this with 26 picks selected so far. So maybe he goes in the first round. We'll see. But thank you guys for listening. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. See you on the other side. Peace out. I'm loving the pop off.